We need you to transfer $50,000 by Friday. The text message from my mother arrived at 6:47 a.m. while I was getting ready for my shift at Riverside General Hospital. I stared at my phone, coffee mug frozen halfway to my lips, certain I was misreading something. $50,000? For what? I scrolled up through our recent conversations, looking for context, for some explanation that would make this demand make sense. There was nothing. Just grocery lists, work schedule updates, and a few photos of my sister Madison's new house that she'd been posting nonstop on Instagram for the past 2 months. The house my parents had surprised her with. The house they'd bought her as a early success gift when she landed her marketing job. The house that apparently, somehow, I was now expected to help pay for. I called my mom immediately, my hands already shaking with a mixture of confusion and dread. When she answered, her voice was cheerful, casual, like she'd just asked me to pick up milk from the store instead of demanding more money than I'd saved in 3 years of working double shifts as an ICU nurse. "Oh good, you got my message. Can you handle the transfer today? We really need it processed before the weekend." That's when my world tilted sideways. Because in that moment, I realized my parents had made a decision about my money, my future, my life, without ever asking me. And Madison, my little sister, who had just turned 25 and was living in a $650,000 dream house, had no idea she was about to become the reason our family would never be the same again. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in Riverside, California, in the Oak Grove neighborhood, our family looked perfect from the outside. My parents, Linda and Robert Chen, had built what everyone considered a successful life. Mom was one of the top real estate agents in the area, always impeccably dressed with her hair styled just right, driving her white BMW to showings and open houses throughout Riverside County. Dad owned a small but thriving insurance agency that had been serving local families for over 15 years. They had the beautiful 2-story house with the manicured lawn, the successful business, and 2 daughters who they proudly introduced at community events and family gatherings. Madison and I were only 3 years apart, but we might as well have been from different planets. She inherited Mom's natural charisma and Dad's easygoing charm, the kind of person who could walk into any room and immediately become the center of attention. Even as a little girl, Madison knew how to work a crowd. She'd perform little dances at family parties, tell elaborate stories that had all the adults laughing, and somehow always managed to get exactly what she wanted with a combination of dramatic tears and infectious giggles. I was different, quieter, more observant, the type of child who preferred reading in the corner to performing in the center of the room. While Madison was building her social empire in elementary school, I was volunteering at the local animal shelter and tutoring kids who struggled with math. Mom always said I was too serious for my own good, that I needed to learn how to shine, like Madison did. Dad would just ruffle my hair and tell me I was his little helper, which felt loving at the time but somehow always made me feel smaller rather than special. The differences between us became more pronounced as we got older. Madison sailed through high school as student body vice president, homecoming princess, and captain of the dance team. She had the kind of confidence that made everything look effortless, even when I knew she was struggling with her grades or stressed about college applications. I spent my high school years working part-time at a local clinic, maintaining a perfect GPA, and planning my path to nursing school with the methodical determination that would later serve me well in the ICU. Our parents' reactions to our different approaches to life set a pattern that would follow us into adulthood. When Madison threw elaborate birthday parties that required weeks of planning and hundreds of dollars in decorations, Mom would beam with pride and post dozens of photos on Facebook talking about her social butterfly and how Madison had such a gift for bringing people together. When I spent my birthday volunteering at the free clinic and then having a quiet dinner with 2 close friends, it was treated as sweet but somehow lacking. "Alex is so low maintenance," Mom would say, and while it was meant as a compliment, it always felt like code for easy to overlook. The pattern continued through college. Madison chose UC San Diego for its social scene and proximity to the beach, changing her major 3 times before settling on communications with a focus on digital marketing. She joined a sorority, studied abroad in Spain, and graduated with a network of connections and a portfolio of Instagram photos that showcased what looked like 4 years of nonstop adventures. Mom and Dad attended her graduation ceremony, threw her a party at the country club, and spent months helping her navigate the job market in Los Angeles. I chose the nursing program at UC Riverside, living at home to save money and working weekends at a local hospital to gain experience. I graduated summa cum laude, passed my boards on the first try, and was immediately hired into the intensive care unit at Riverside General, one of the most competitive positions available to new graduates. My graduation ceremony was on a Tuesday, and while my parents attended, we celebrated with dinner at Olive Garden and a small cake from the grocery store. Not because they loved me less, I told myself, but because I didn't need the fanfare. I was practical, I was low maintenance, I was the reliable one. For the first few years after college, this dynamic felt sustainable, even comfortable. Madison struggled to find her footing in the competitive Los Angeles marketing world, moving between agencies and sometimes needing financial help from our parents to make rent or cover unexpected expenses. I was building my career steadily, working my way up from new graduate to senior nurse, earning the respect of my colleagues and the trust of patients' families during some of the most difficult moments of their lives. I loved my work. There's something profound about being present with people during their most vulnerable moments, about having the knowledge and skills to make a real difference in whether someone lives or dies. The 12-hour shifts were exhausting, the emotional toll was significant, but every time I helped a patient recover or provided comfort to a grieving family, I felt a sense of purpose that I knew not everyone was lucky enough to experience in their career. Madison, meanwhile, had found her niche in social media marketing. She landed a position with a lifestyle brand that encouraged employees to build their personal brands, and she threw herself into creating an Instagram presence that showcased her perfectly curated life. Her feed was full of aesthetic coffee shops, trendy restaurants, weekend trips to Napa Valley and San Francisco, and carefully styled outfit photos that made her life look like a magazine spread. What her 15,000 followers didn't see were the credit card bills, the anxiety attacks when campaigns didn't perform well, or the constant pressure to maintain an image that was far more expensive than her actual salary could support. I knew because Madison would call me late at night, usually after she'd had too much wine, and confess that she felt like she was drowning. She'd maxed out 2 credit cards trying to keep up with the lifestyle her job required her to project, and she was terrified that her boss would find out she was living paycheck to paycheck while promoting financial wellness products. During these late-night conversations, I'd listen patiently and offer practical advice. I helped her create budgets, suggested she talk to our parents about consolidating her debt, and even offered to lend her money when things got particularly tight. "You're so lucky you chose a stable career," she'd tell me. "You don't have to worry about any of this stuff." And I'd reassure her that things would get better, that she just needed to find her balance, that our parents would understand if she needed help. What I didn't realize was that while I was being the supportive big sister, listening to Madison's financial struggles and offering solutions, our parents were watching her lifestyle from the outside and seeing something completely different. They saw her Instagram success, her growing follower count, her invitations to brand events and product launches. They saw her as someone who was building something impressive, something that reflected well on the family, something that proved their daughter was destined for greatness. They also saw me as stable, reliable, someone who had chosen a safe path and would always be fine, someone who didn't need support because I was naturally responsible, someone who had everything figured out and could probably even help support others when the time came. The first hint of what was coming arrived in the form of excited phone calls about Madison's, quote, amazing opportunity. A boutique marketing agency in Orange County had offered her a position with a significant salary increase, but it would require her to relocate. The job was perfect for her, our parents explained. But the housing market in Orange County was brutal, and Madison would never be able to save enough for a down payment while paying high rent and trying to establish herself in a new area. "We're thinking about helping her with a house," Mom mentioned casually during one of our weekly check-in calls. "Real estate is such a good investment, and Madison deserves a stable foundation while she's building her career. She's worked so hard to get to this point." I thought it was a wonderful idea. Madison had been struggling financially, and homeownership would give her the stability she needed to focus on her career without the stress of constantly rising rent prices. I assumed they meant a modest starter home, Maybe a condo or a small house that Madison could afford with some help for the down payment. I never imagined they were talking about a $650,000 modern farmhouse in Rancho Mirage, with 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a gourmet kitchen with granite countertops, and a backyard pool that looked like it belonged in a resort brochure. The house purchase happened quickly, much more quickly than I realized at the time. One week, Madison was stressing about apartment hunting in Orange County, and the next week, she was posting photos of herself holding keys in front of a stunning white house with black shutters and a wraparound porch. The Instagram caption read, "Dreams do come true when you have family who believes in you." Grateful doesn't even begin to cover it. New house, new job, new chapter. The post got over 2,000 likes and hundreds of comments from followers who wanted to know how a 25-year-old marketing coordinator had managed to buy such an incredible house. Madison responded to some of the comments with vague references to family support and investment opportunities, but mostly she just posted heart emojis and thanked people for their congratulations. I was genuinely happy for her. The house was beautiful, the job opportunity sounded perfect, and it seemed like Madison had finally found the stability she'd been searching for. When she invited me over for an impromptu tour the week after she moved in, I drove the hour and a half to Rancho Mirage with a bottle of champagne and a housewarming gift, excited to celebrate my little sister's success. Walking through that house was like stepping into a lifestyle magazine. Every room was perfectly proportioned, filled with natural light, and designed with the kind of attention to detail that I knew must have cost a fortune. The kitchen had professional-grade appliances, a massive island with seating for 6, and a walk-in pantry that was bigger than my entire kitchen. The master bedroom had a sitting area, a walk-in closet that looked like a boutique, and a bathroom with a soaking tub positioned perfectly for Instagram photos. Madison gave me the full tour, with the enthusiasm of someone who still couldn't quite believe the house was hers. She showed me the home office where she planned to film content, the guest bedrooms that she was already decorating for weekend visitors, and the backyard space where she wanted to host pool parties and brand events. Everything was expensive, everything was Instagram ready, and everything was exactly the kind of house that someone with Madison's lifestyle aspirations would choose. "How did you manage all this?" I asked as we stood in the kitchen, genuinely curious about the logistics. I knew Madison's salary, and even with a raise, I couldn't imagine how she'd qualified for a mortgage on a house that cost more than 10 times her annual income. Madison's enthusiasm dimmed slightly, and she busied herself adjusting the flowers in a vase on the kitchen island. "Mom and Dad helped with the down payment," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "They said real estate was a good investment, and this way I can build equity instead of throwing money away on rent." I nodded, thinking that made sense. Our parents had always been smart about money, and a substantial down payment would make the monthly mortgage payments much more manageable. I assumed they'd probably helped with $20,000 or $30,000, maybe $40,000 at the most. It was generous, but it was the kind of thing loving parents might do to help their child take advantage of a good opportunity. "That was really generous of them," I said, meaning it. "The house is absolutely gorgeous, Madison. You're going to be so happy here." And she was happy. Over the next 2 months, Madison threw herself into making the house perfect. She hired a photographer to take professional photos for her Instagram, hosted a series of content creation days where she invited other influencers to film in different rooms, and started planning an elaborate housewarming party that would serve as both a celebration and a networking event. Her Instagram following grew to 18,000. Brands started reaching out about partnerships, and her new job was going better than expected. She looked relaxed and confident in a way I hadn't seen since college, and our parents were absolutely glowing with pride. Every conversation included updates about Madison's latest success, her growing influence, or some new opportunity that had come her way because of her beautiful house and curated lifestyle. I was working more hours than ever, pulling extra shifts to cover for colleagues who'd left for other positions, dealing with a particularly challenging period in the ICU, where we'd lost several patients. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Despite our best efforts, the work was emotionally draining, but I was also saving money at a rate I'd never managed before. I was getting close to having enough for a down payment on my own small house, maybe a 2-bedroom place closer to the hospital where I could have a home office and a garden. I'd been looking at properties online, calculating mortgage payments, and imagining what it would feel like to own something of my own. I wanted a place where I could paint the walls whatever color I wanted, where I could have a vegetable garden, and maybe adopt a dog from the shelter, where I still volunteered on weekends. Nothing extravagant, just something stable and mine. That's why the text message from my mother felt like such a punch to the stomach. $50,000. By Friday. No explanation, no discussion, just an expectation that I would somehow produce an amount of money that represented more than 2 years of careful saving and sacrifice. When I called Mom back that morning, still standing in my kitchen in my scrubs, she explained the situation with the kind of casual tone she might use to discuss weekend plans. The house purchase had been more complicated than they'd initially planned. They'd used a business credit line to provide Madison's down payment, expecting to pay it back gradually as their real estate business picked up after the pandemic slowdown. But the market hadn't recovered as quickly as they'd hoped. Several major deals had fallen through, their commercial clients were downsizing rather than expanding, and the interest rates on the business loan were higher than they'd anticipated. They needed to pay down the credit line before the terms changed in 6 months, and they'd already contributed everything they could from their personal savings. Madison doesn't know how tight things are, Mom explained. She's doing so well, and we don't want to stress her out when she's just getting established in her new position. You understand how sensitive she is about money stuff. I did understand. I understood that Madison had always been protected from financial stress while I'd been working since I was 16. I understood that Madison's happiness and peace of mind were considered more important than discussing reality with her. I understood that somehow, as always, I was expected to be the responsible one who solved problems, rather than the one who needed support. But Mom, I said, my voice barely steady, $50,000 is more than I have. I've been saving for my own house down payment. I can't just transfer you my entire life savings. There was a pause, and then Mom's voice took on that familiar tone of patient disappointment, the one she'd used throughout my childhood when I wasn't being understanding enough, flexible enough, family-oriented enough. Alex, honey, this isn't just about Madison. This is about our family business. If we can't pay down this loan, it could affect everything. Your father's agency, our house, our retirement. We wouldn't ask if we had any other choice. And it's not like we're asking you to give the money away. This is an investment in Madison's future, which is an investment in our family's future. When the house appreciates in value, when Madison gets established and can refinance, you'll get your money back with interest. The logic was dizzying. My money would become an investment in Madison's house, which would somehow benefit the whole family, which would eventually benefit me. I would get my money back, with interest, at some undefined point in the future, when Madison felt like refinancing. My dreams of homeownership would be put on hold indefinitely, so that Madison could continue living in a house that cost more than I'd make in 8 years. What if I can't spare $50,000? I asked, already knowing the answer would make me feel guilty. Well, Mom said, and I could hear her choosing her words carefully. I suppose we could ask Madison to sell the house, but that would be devastating for her, especially now when everything is going so well. And it would be a huge financial loss for everyone, because houses like that don't sit on the market long in this area. We'd probably have to sell below market value just to get out quickly. The guilt was immediate and overwhelming. Madison would lose her dream house, her stability, her newfound confidence and success, all because I was being selfish about money. Our parents might lose their business, their retirement security, their reputation in the community, all because I wanted to buy my own house instead of supporting my family when they needed me. I need some time to think about this, I said. Of course, sweetheart, but we really do need an answer soon. The payment is due Friday, and if we miss it, the penalties are significant. I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen, still in my scrubs, staring at the financial planning spreadsheet I'd been updating the night before. $23,000 in my savings account. Every dollar earned through 12-hour shifts, overtime pay, and holiday bonuses. Every dollar saved by living in a modest apartment, driving a 10-year-old car, and buying generic groceries instead of the organic brands Madison preferred. Every dollar representing a dream of having something that was mine, something stable and permanent and beautiful in its own modest way. Something that would be gone by Friday, transferred to support Madison's Instagram-perfect lifestyle, while I continued living paycheck to paycheck despite working one of the most demanding jobs imaginable. The housewarming party was scheduled for the following Saturday. Madison had been planning it for weeks, ordering custom decorations, hiring a catering company, and creating a guest list that included everyone from high school friends to professional contacts to social media influencers she'd met through work. She'd invited me weeks ago, excited to show off the house to everyone and celebrate what she kept calling her new chapter. I'd been looking forward to it, proud of my sister's success and happy to celebrate with her. Now, the thought of attending a party celebrating a house that I'd been secretly forced to pay for made me feel sick, but I also knew that not attending would require explanations, would create family drama, would somehow make me the problem instead of the victim. Madison had no idea that her dream house had become my financial nightmare. She had no idea that while she was planning pool parties and content shoots, I was staring at empty savings accounts and abandoned homeownership dreams. She had no idea that our parents had made a decision about my money, my future, my life, without ever asking me. And I had 6 days to figure out whether I was going to continue being the responsible, reliable, understanding daughter who sacrificed her own dreams for family harmony, or whether I was finally going to find the courage to say no. The next 3 days passed in a haze of sleepless nights and mechanical work routines. I'd arrive at the hospital, check on my patients, administer medications, monitor vital signs, and provide comfort to families, all while my mind churned endlessly over the impossible situation my parents had dropped in my lap. My colleagues noticed my distraction. Sarah, the charge nurse who'd become something of a mentor over the years, pulled me aside after I'd mixed up 2 patients' medication schedules. "You're somewhere else entirely today, Alex. Everything okay at home?" I wanted to tell her. Sarah had been through her own family financial drama when her brother had gotten into gambling debt and expected her to bail him out. She'd understand the position I was in, the way family obligations could strangle your own dreams. But the words stuck in my throat. How do you explain that your parents had secretly spent your life savings without asking, then presented it as a family emergency that only you could solve? "Just tired," I said, forcing a smile. Double shifts catching up with me. Sarah studied my face with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent 20 years reading people's pain. "You know my door's always open if you need to talk. Sometimes family stuff is harder to handle than anything we see and hear." That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, staring at my bank account balance for the 100th time. $23,467. The number hadn't magically increased since morning, despite my desperate hoping. I opened a new browser tab and pulled up mortgage calculators, plugging in different scenarios. How long would it take to save $50,000 again? At my current rate, assuming no emergencies, no car repairs, no medical bills, maybe 3 years. 3 more years of living in my tiny apartment, watching my friends buy houses and start families, while I rebuilt savings that should never have been touched. I called Jordan, my partner of 2 years, and tried to explain the situation without sounding completely insane. Jordan taught 3rd grade at Roosevelt Elementary and had the kind of patient, logical approach to problems that usually helped me think clearly. But this situation was so far outside the realm of normal family dysfunction that even Jordan struggled to process it. "Wait, back up," Jordan said after I'd stumbled through the basic facts. "Your parents bought Madison a house, and now they want you to pay for it? How is that legal? How is that even possible?" "They didn't steal my money," I said, though the words felt strange in my mouth. "They're asking me to help with a family financial emergency. Technically, I can say no. But they're manipulating you into saying yes by making you responsible for Madison's happiness and their business survival." When Jordan put it that way, the manipulation was so obvious it made me feel stupid for not seeing it immediately. But that's how manipulation works in families, isn't it? It's wrapped in love and concern and presented as normal sacrifice that any good daughter would make without question. "What happens if you just say no?" Jordan asked. I'd been asking myself the same question. Madison loses the house. Mom and Dad might lose the business. Everyone in the family knows I had the money to help, but chose not to. I become this selfish daughter who prioritized her own wants over family needs. And what happens if you say yes? I lose my entire down payment fund. My homeownership dreams get put on hold indefinitely. I subsidize Madison's Instagram lifestyle while continuing to live paycheck to paycheck, despite working twice as many hours as she does. Jordan was quiet for a long moment. "Alex, you know what the right choice is here, don't you? You know this isn't actually your responsibility." I did know. In my rational mind, I absolutely knew that parents shouldn't make major financial decisions using their adult children's money without permission. I knew that Madison's house wasn't my problem to solve. I knew that I'd worked incredibly hard for my savings and deserved to use them for my own dreams. But knowing what was right and being able to act on it are two completely different things when you've spent your entire life being the good daughter, the understanding one, the person who solved problems instead of creating them. Thursday morning brought another text from Mom. "Hi, honey. Just checking in about tomorrow's transfer. What time works best for you? We want to make sure everything processes smoothly. Dad says thank you for being such a wonderful daughter and helping our family through this rough patch. We're so proud of you." The message made me feel sick. The casual tone, the assumption that my compliance was guaranteed, the manipulation disguised as gratitude. They were proud of me for handing over my life savings. They were treating my financial sacrifice like a generous gift instead of acknowledging that they'd put me in an impossible position. I stared at the message for 20 minutes before responding. "I need to talk to you and Dad tonight. In person. This is too important for texts." Mom's response came immediately. "Of course, sweetheart. We'll be home after 7. We can order dinner and discuss all the details." All the details. As if there were complex logistics to work out, instead of a simple question of whether I was going to allow my family to financially manipulate me. That evening, I drove to my childhood home in Oak Grove, with my stomach in knots. The house looked exactly the same as it had throughout my adolescence. Mom's perfectly maintained garden, Dad's meticulously clean garage, the same beige paint and brown shutters that had seemed so stable and comforting when I was younger. Now it felt like a facade, hiding the kind of financial desperation that led parents to treat their daughter's savings account like a family emergency fund. Mom had ordered Thai food from our old family favorite restaurant, the kind of gesture that was meant to make the evening feel normal and comfortable. We sat around the dining room table where I'd done homework for 12 years, eating pad thai and spring rolls, while my parents explained their financial situation with the kind of detailed transparency they'd never offered before. The real estate business really was struggling. The pandemic had changed everything about how people bought and sold homes. Virtual tours had replaced in-person showings. Commercial properties were sitting empty as businesses failed or downsized, and the competition from online real estate platforms was cutting into their traditional client base. They'd been operating at a loss for 8 months, using savings and credit to keep the business afloat while hoping things would turn around. Madison's house purchase had been impulsive, they admitted. She'd called them in tears after losing out on 3 different rental applications because her credit score wasn't quite high enough, and her income wasn't sufficient for the areas she wanted to live in. The job opportunity was real and time-sensitive, and Madison had been so excited about finally getting her life on track that they'd wanted to help her succeed. "We thought we could handle the business loan payments," Dad explained, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. "The house was supposed to be an investment that would benefit everyone. Madison gets stability, we get an asset that will appreciate, and eventually when things turn around, everyone wins." "But things haven't turned around," I said quietly. "Not yet," Mom said quickly, "but they will. Real estate always recovers. This is just a temporary rough patch." The problem was that temporary rough patches required immediate solutions, and I was apparently the only solution available. They'd already borrowed against their retirement savings, maxed out business credit lines, and exhausted personal savings. My $50,000 wasn't just helpful, it was literally the only thing standing between them and bankruptcy. "What about Madison?" I asked. "Does she know any of this? Does she know you used a business loan for her down payment? Does she know the family business is in trouble?" My parents exchanged a look that told me everything I needed to know. Madison had no idea. Madison was posting Instagram stories about her perfect morning routine in her perfect kitchen, completely oblivious to the financial crisis that her dream house had created. "We don't want to burden her with this," Mom said. "She's finally found her footing professionally. She's building something important with her social media presence. The stress of knowing about our financial problems would derail everything she's worked for. But somehow it was fine to burden me with their financial problems. Somehow my stress and derailed dreams were acceptable collateral damage as long as Madison's perfect life remained intact." I've been saving that money for 3 years, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I work 12-hour shifts. I pick up overtime whenever it's available. I drive a car that's older than some of my patients. I've been planning to buy my own house. And you will, Dad said earnestly. This is just a delay, not a cancellation. When Madison refinances or when the business recovers, you'll get your money back with interest. Think of it as an investment in your sister's success. An investment. That's what they kept calling it. As if I'd chosen to put my money into Madison's house instead of having it demanded from me under threat of family destruction. The conversation went in circles for 2 hours. My parents presented their financial crisis as an unavoidable natural disaster that had befallen the family, requiring everyone to pull together for survival. I tried to explain that sacrificing my homeownership dreams to subsidize Madison's lifestyle felt fundamentally unfair, especially since Madison didn't even know she was living in a house that was causing financial catastrophe for everyone else. Every time I came close to saying no, Mom would mention how proud they were of my responsibility and maturity. Dad would talk about family loyalty and how much they'd sacrificed for both Madison and me over the years. They'd paint pictures of Madison's devastation when she learned she'd have to sell the house, of the business failing and taking their retirement with it, of the family being torn apart by financial ruin that I could prevent with a single bank transfer. By the time I left that evening, I felt completely emotionally drained. I hadn't agreed to transfer the money, but I hadn't definitively refused either. I'd promised to give them my final answer by noon on Friday, which gave me less than 18 hours to make a decision that would affect the rest of my life. I drove home through the quiet Riverside streets, past the modest neighborhoods where I'd been looking at houses, past the hospital where I spent my days caring for people in crisis, past the coffee shop where I'd met with a mortgage broker just 2 weeks earlier to discuss pre-approval for my home loan. Everything looked different now, tinged with the knowledge that my carefully planned future was about to be sacrificed for someone else's impulsive decision. Jordan was waiting for me at my apartment with a bottle of wine and the kind of patient understanding that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with them in the first place. We sat on my couch, Jordan listening while I rehashed the entire conversation, trying to make sense of how I'd ended up in this position. "They're asking you to choose between your dreams and Madison's," Jordan said finally. "But that's not actually a choice you should have to make. Madison's housing situation isn't your responsibility. But if I don't help, she loses everything. The house, the stability, maybe even the job if she has to relocate suddenly. And if you do help, you lose everything. Your savings, your timeline for homeownership, your financial independence." Jordan was right, but rightness felt irrelevant when I imagined facing Madison at the housewarming party, knowing I'd chosen to let her lose her dream house, rather than delay my own dreams for a few years. "What would you do?" I asked. Jordan considered the question seriously. "I'd probably do exactly what you're thinking of doing. I'd transfer the money, sacrifice my own plans, and spend the next decade resenting everyone involved. Because that's what families like yours train you to do. They train you to believe that your needs matter less than everyone else's comfort." The honesty was brutal and accurate. I had been trained, throughout my childhood, to be the accommodating one. The one who didn't require attention, didn't create problems, didn't have needs that inconvenienced anyone else. The one who solved other people's crises instead of having crises of my own. "But here's the thing," Jordan continued. "Every time you sacrifice yourself to avoid family conflict, you teach them that your boundaries don't matter. You teach them that they can make decisions about your life without asking. You teach Madison that she's entitled to financial support without even knowing she's receiving it." I spent that night staring at the ceiling, playing out scenarios in my head. I imagined transferring the money and watching my bank balance drop to nearly zero. I imagined calling my mortgage broker to explain that my timeline for homeownership had been indefinitely delayed. I imagined years of extra shifts and overtime, rebuilding savings, while Madison posted photos of pool parties and perfectly styled rooms. But I also imagined the alternative. I imagined Madison's devastation when she learned she'd have to sell the house. I imagined my parents' disappointment and financial ruin. I imagined family gatherings where everyone knew I'd chosen my own interests over the family's survival. Both scenarios felt unbearable. Friday morning arrived gray and cloudy, matching my mood perfectly. I had made my decision sometime around 3 a.m., lying in bed with Jordan sleeping peacefully beside me. It wasn't a good decision or a decision I felt proud of, but it was the only decision I could live with given the emotional manipulation and family pressure I was facing. I called Mom at exactly noon. "I'll transfer the money," I said without preamble. "But I want it in writing that this is a loan, not a gift. I want a repayment schedule. And I want Madison to know what happened." There was silence on the other end of the line, then Mom's voice, bright with relief and gratitude. "Oh, sweetheart. Thank you. You're saving our entire family. We'll absolutely put everything in writing, and we'll figure out the best way to explain things to Madison." But even as I agreed to their demands, something inside me was hardening into resolve. I would transfer the money, but I wouldn't pretend to be happy about it. I would attend Madison's housewarming party, but I wouldn't celebrate a house that I'd been forced to subsidize. And I would make sure that everyone involved understood the true cost of their decision, even if it meant destroying the comfortable family narrative that had protected Madison from reality for her entire life. The bank transfer took 3 minutes. $50,000 moved from my savings account to my parents' business account with a few clicks on my laptop. 3 years of careful saving, gone in an instant to pay for a house I'd never been asked if I wanted to help purchase. I screenshot the confirmation page and texted it to Mom with a message, "Done. I expect the loan documents by Monday and a conversation with Madison before her party on Saturday." Mom's response was effusive. "You are the most wonderful daughter in the world. Dad and I are so grateful. Madison is going to be so touched when she learns what you've done for her." Madison was going to be touched. As if my financial sacrifice was a generous gift instead of extortion. As if I'd chosen to subsidize her lifestyle instead of being manipulated into it through threats of family destruction. But Madison was about to learn something about the true cost of her dream house. And I was about to learn whether I had the courage to stop being the family member who suffered in silence while everyone else lived their perfect lives. The housewarming party was less than 24 hours away, and I was done pretending that everything was fine. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.